Page 525 continued. Structuralism and post-structuralism. Riffateri, Riffattere, Levi-Strauss, Levi-Straus, Jacobson, Jakobson. All structuralists do not follow Saussure's Saussure thinking on language and structures in every particular. However, their central concepts are similar, if not identical. The central idea germane to all structuralist thinking is, interestingly, the concept of a center. The center is the cohering principle in every structure. It is both a locus and a force. A critic's job is to examine how the parts of a poem are related to one another and to the center. The center is not a theme, an argument, or even a perception. In the semiotics of poetry, Michael Riffateri observes that poetry is a language of signs which build up their own verbal structures, essentially different from those of real life. According to structuralists such as Levi-Strauss and Jacobson, poetry is a form of language which is, quote, set towards the message, unquote, stop. Riffateri, however, avers that poetry is not mimesis but semiosis. Nigel Mapp, M-A-P-P, explains, quote, for Riffateri, a poem comes into being in its movement away from representation within bracket mimesis bracket closed and towards the formation of patterns of significance, which are specific to its own verbal structures within brackets semiosis stop. This movement comes via a series of irregularities or even ungrammaticalities which progressively jolt the reader out of the calm expectation or acceptance of mimesis, unquote, stop, Jacobson and Levi-Strauss. Riffateri's search for a center is replaced by some other structuralists like Roman Jacobson and Claude Levi-Strauss with another cohering principle, that of the dialect or binary opposition. Jacobson and Levi-Strauss's famous analysis of Baudelaire's sonnet, quote, Les Elias Chats, C-H-A-T-S, unquote, is a fine example of structuralist criticism based on binary opposition. Apparently, the center of the poem is a languorous atmosphere created by the poet to suggest the mystery of domestic cats. However, according to Jacobson and Levi-Strauss's analysis, the poem has no center but is built around a series of binary opposites. Stephen Conner observes, quote, structural centering is here achieved not around a hidden core of meaning, but by patterns of sym, balance, and repetition, which the analysis aims to concentrate together, unquote, stop. Thus, instead of remaining occupied by the notion of the center, page 526, Jacobson and Levi-Strauss are chiefly concerned with the detection of equivalences, antinomies, contrapuntats, contrapuntats, and binary oppositions, which replace in their critical procedure the paramount concern with the center as exemplified by structuralists like Riffateri. Post-structuralism. It must be pointed out at the outset that post-structuralism is not anti-structuralism pure and simple. Post-structuralists such as Foucault, Foucault, and Lacan, Lacan, reject the structuralist search of a center or its substitution by sets of binary oppositions. However, even without a center, a text has a meaning, in fact a univocal meaning, provided by other elements present in it or even conspicuously absent from it. Take, for example, Ronald Bird's Barths apostrophe S/Z, a reading of Balzac's short story, quote, Sarracine, Sarrasine, unquote. Stop. Sarracine, the protagonist, loves a, quote, woman, unquote, who is ultimately discovered to be a castrated man. Stop. Needless to say, this revelation shatters Sarracine. It is the absence of potency which is seen by Birds to be omnipresent in the story. Similarly, Jacques Lacan's reading of Edgar Allan Poe's The Purloined Letter emphasizes the movements of a stolen letter which provides meaning to the text. Three group of feminists. All feminists share together the central concern, namely the parity of the two sexes, and yet they are far from being a homogeneous group, voicing identical concerns in identical ways. Jane Freeman classifies feminisms into three principal groups as follows. 1. Liberal feminism. Liberal feminists work within a liberal state. They do not question the structure, economic or political of the state, but they demand that the rights and privileges given by the state should be equally shared by men and women. 2. Marxist and socialist feminism. Feminists of this category interlink the oppression of women and the exploitation of the working class in the capitalist economic system. Women suffer a double exploitation as women and as members of the working class. 3. Radical feminism. Radical feminists disregard all questions of political and economic dispensation to concentrate on the roots of the problem. The central root of the problem is the system of patriarchy, which leads to all kinds of discrimination against and devaluation of women. Politico-economic questions are not the roots but only auxiliaries. The concept of gender is the real villain and has to be demolished. Jane Friedman, while identifying these three categories of feminism, ignores some other feminisms, such as black feminism and post-colonial feminism, which interlink the oppression of women with respectively the exploitation of black natives by the white masters and that of the third world natives by their colonial masters. Friedman's focus on centrality is perhaps the explanation. The central issue, sex and gender. As we have pointed out above, the central radical or essential focus of all kinds of feminism is the unjust discrimination between men and women when they are both human beings. Here we may explain the difference between sex and gender. Feminists insist, and insist rightly, that while sex is real and biological, gender is nothing real but only a social construction. A woman is not born but made by the patriarchal society, which its concept of all the do's and don'ts for women, which ensures subordinate status for them. This is the central issue, and all kinds of feminism take their roots from it and develop themselves in various directions according to their local and circumstantial concerns and requirements. Para. Thus, feminists of the world are not a coherent and unanimous lot. However, in their radical concern, as we have pointed out above, there is absolute unanimity among them. Gender inequalities and oppressions manifest themselves differently in different societies and at different times. For example, one of the major problems today in our own country is that of, quote, dowry deaths, unquote, stop. While Indian feminists are overtly occupied by it, their foreign counterparts have other local concerns. Para. Feminists both a united and a divided lot. Even on some fundamental universal questions, feminists are not an altogether united lot. Their mutual debates are often acrimonious. Take, for example, the questions of prostitution, pornography, and homosexuality. Most feminists attack prostitution as something degrading to women. Page 527. It is men who commodify women as objects of male pleasure. However, a few feminists are not against having male prostitutes or gigolos whose services may be available to desirous women for a price. The motive is revenge, pure and simple. Vornography, Vornography, is also attacked for its tendency to objectify woman. As somebody has said, pornography is the theory and rape is the practice. As regards homosexuality, particularly lesbianism, a huge majority of feminists are in its favor. Complete withdrawal from heterosexuality affirms woman's independence. Lesbianism, with or without the sexual component, is considered by most feminists as an assertion of woman's independence. Para. There is great emphasis on the organic unity of structure and meaning. According to David Lodge, quote, structuralism is or was a movement in what the continental Europeans call the human sciences, which sought to explain and understand cultural phenomena, bracket, from poems to menus, comma, from primitive myths to modern advertisements, bracket closed, as manifestations of underlying systems of significations, of which the exemplary model is verbal language itself, especially as elucidated by the Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure, unquote, stop, para. The literary theorists have widened the scope of literary criticism by borrowing its terms and concepts very largely from other disciplines: linguistics, philosophy, Marxism, and psychoanalysis. So literary criticism has become a powerful source of interdisciplinary approach and expansion of knowledge. The varied interpretation of literary texts are derived from the minute analysis of the texture and structure of various works in the light of different theories. So a literary work is liable to varied interpretations which the writer perhaps never intended. David Lodge points out that in, quote, our era, criticism is not merely a library of secondary aids to the understanding and appreciation of literary texts, comma, but also a rapidly increasing body of knowledge in its own right, unquote, stop, para. Structuralism is a school of literary criticism which flourished during 1960s. Ferdinand de Saussure's book, Courses in General Linguistics, 1916, popularized structuralism and introduced structural linguistics, which attaches importance to signs, that is, the black marks. Capital C, small a, tea rather than the object called cat. It is an attempt to apply this linguistic theory to objects and activities other than language itself. According to Eagleton, in structuralism, the poetics detaches or dislocates the sign from the object, and thus the usual relation between sign and referent is disturbed. It is the referent which invests the sign with quote, a certain independence as an object of value in itself, unquote, stop. The theory of structuralism, which considers the text of a literary work as an integrated verbal entity and ignores the content, the writer, the society and the reader response, distances itself from any suggestion of value judgment. It could no longer influence the literary scenario of 20th century. It found only a limited number of followers, and in course of time it was rejected. It was followed by post-structuralism, which found its staunch exponent in Jacques Derrida, Derrida, who enunciated the theory of deconstruction. Jacques, Jacques Derrida. The term, quote, deconstruction, unquote, is among those that the French philosopher Jacques Derrida has used to describe the challenge to philosophical thought that unfolds in his writings. In, quote, Letter to a Japanese Friend, unquote, comma, which addresses the problem of translating the word, quote, deconstruction, unquote, Derrida remarks that it, quote, must always be guarded by an entire discourse, unquote, stop. Derrida's work offers close readings of philosophical, literary, anthropological, and linguistic writings, including works by Plato, Immanuel Kant, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Ferdinand de Saussure, J.L. Austin, Claude Lévi-Strauss, Sigmund Freud, Stéphane Mallarmé, James Joyce, and Franz Kafka. The philosophical thought Derrida challenges through these readings is not merely a particular canon of texts or an academic discipline, but fundamental assumptions about meaning, classification, communication, and authenticity that structure Western thought. Derrida, the renowned French philosopher, enunciated the doctrine of deconstruction, which marks the beginning of the era of post-structuralism, in his paper Structure, Sign, and Play in the Discourse of Human Sciences, 1966. It brought about a revolutionary change in linguistic criticism and humanities. Derrida's other works are Writing and Difference, 1978, of Grammatology, 1976, and Dissemination, 1982. Derrida's paper Structure, Sign, and Play is of great importance in the history of literary criticism. It marks, in the words of David Large, quote, the moment at which, single quote, post-structuralism, single unquote, as a movement begins, comma, page 528, opposing itself to classical structuralism as well as to traditional humanism, comma, and empiricism, colon. The moment, as Derrida himself put it, when, quote, the structurality of structure had to begin to be thought, unquote, stop. What is deconstruction? The concise Oxford Dictionary defines deconstruction as, quote, a method of critical analysis of philosophical and literary language which emphasizes the internal workings of language and conceptual systems, the rational quality of meaning, and the assumptions implicit in forms of expression, unquote, stop. Derrida's theory of deconstruction may be deemed as, quote, the rereading or breaking down of a text to show the multiple meanings at work within language. Focusing mainly on language, he contends that the traditional or metaphysical reading of a text makes a number of false assumptions. That language is capable of expressing constant and unchanging ideas, that the author of a text is the only source of its meaning, and that in the hierarchy of language, writing is secondary to speech, unquote, stop. It may be said that, quote, deconstruction is to take an idea, comma, an institution or a set of values, and to understand its mechanism by removing that cement that constitutes it, unquote, stop. Para. The deconstructive criticism disregards the content, other literary qualities, and linguistic excellence in a work. It is based as the deconstruction of the text, ignoring both the center and content of the text. According to Miller, the deconstructive critic seeks to find the, quote, alogical element in a text, comma, the thread, comma, when fueled, F-U-L-L-E-D, comma, will unravel the whole texture, dot, dot, dot. The infallible rule of the deconstructive quest is, quote, seek and ye shall find, unquote, stop, para. According to deconstructive theory, words have no fixed meaning. Language is not a stable object, and therefore does not yield the same meaning in all conditions and circumstances. It implies that words are black dots on white paper, that is, they are signs which can be variously interpreted. Para. Derrida's theory of deconstruction found wide acceptance, especially in USA, in 1970s and 1980s. It was applied to a broad range of subjects, including literary theory, linguistics, anthropology, art, music, architecture, and political science.